So hello everyone, welcome to our panel webinar, Lean Six Sigma in Government, Success Stories of Deployment. I'm Tracy O'Rourke, the Chief Innovation Officer with GoLeanSixSigma.com, and I will be your moderator. Please join us in our first activity, and that is tell us where you are calling in from over the world. We'd love to know where you are. Tell us your name, your industry. Look at, we've got people from Wales, the UK, and Brussels, Belgium. Very cool. So the purpose of today's panel is to hear from leaders in government and how they're deploying Lean Six Sigma. And joining us today are leaders from King County's Finance Business Operations Division, or what we call FBOD, and the Port of Seattle. I'll be introducing them in just a moment. Before we begin, let me explain how this will work. Everyone attending will be on mute, and if you experience any technical difficulties, just let us know in the chat window. If you have questions for the panelists, please put them in the chat window. We will try to answer as many questions as we can. If we don't get to all of your questions during the webinar, we'll post the answers in our GoLeanSixSigma.com LinkedIn group so you can see them there. Are you not joined in already at the LinkedIn group? Well, then you should go to LinkedIn and join our group so that you can get some of those questions answered. Okay, so we've got some people from San Diego. We've got people from the Port of Seattle. That's great. We also have, hi, Kara, how are you today? Margaret from North Carolina. We have people from Olympia, Washington as well. Okay, so let's introduce our panelists. We have Ken Guy, who is the Director of the Finance and Business Operations Division from King County. We have Eunjoo Greenhouse, the Deputy Director, also from Finance Business Operations Division from King County, and Larry L., the Executive Chief of Staff and Senior Director of Strategic Initiatives at the Port of Seattle. Welcome, all of you. Thank you for coming. How are you today?
Thanks,
Good.
Tracy.
Thank
Good.
you.
Very good.
Wonderful. Well, I want to give each of them an opportunity to introduce themselves as opposed to me introducing them. So tell us a little bit about your role, how long you've been in government, and how your role is involved with implementing Lean Six Sigma within your organization. So why don't we go ahead and start from left to right. So Ken, tell us a little bit about you.
Right. Well, I've actually had the privilege of working for King County for almost 30 years. And actually started out as an intern with King County in the executive office, and I've been the finance director for a little over 15 years. So it's been a fantastic place to work. As far as my role, I'd say it's providing leadership and oversight direction to about 200 employees, and we're responsible in King County in our division for central accounting, treasury, procurement, payroll and employee benefits, and small business programs. That's basically our focus. And I would say my role in Lean is, I'd characterize it as to model the way for our Lean culture, really promote the Lean culture, and to encourage problem solvers. So, be a coach of problem solvers. Bottom line is to get out of the way so that so our employees can solve problems.
Very nice. Thank you, Ken. Eunjoo, how about you?
Hi, I'm Eunjoo Greenhouse, also from King County Finance Business Operations Division. So my role here is Deputy Director. Basically, I'm Ken's stunt double if he's not available. Oftentimes, and when it comes to Lean, he sets the vision around where we want to lead forward and what our initiatives are for the next few years. I'm in charge of somewhat executing his vision. So I do what he tells me to do.
That's great. I wish
sometimes
I had
sometimes it's vice versa too.
Very rare.
Very nice. Thank you. And Larry Eel.
Hello, welcome everybody. I'm Executive Chief of Staff at the Port of Seattle. We run an airport. We have a marine cargo seaport operation. We have recreational boat marinas, fishermen's terminal, a bunch of parks, and some real estate. And I work for the executive director, and so I sort of manage our executive team and troubleshoot a lot and help him make the best use of his time, do a lot of problem solving at that level. My role in Lean, I'm maybe a little bit unusual in that I'm not a practitioner. I'm not trained in Lean or Six Sigma or anything else. I lead our Lean department, a really fantastic group of very talented folks. And so I'm more of a strategist and a promoter, a cheerleader, a gate opener. I try to create conditions for Lean to expand throughout the port, for more processes to be improved. In my work with the executive team, I come across a lot of opportunities and for Lean, and so I try to convince my fellow executives and managers to consider running a Lean project. And I've spent about half of my career in government. I flipped back and forth between the private sector and the public sector. I've got about 18 years in government service.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. So my first question really is government really different than other industries, public sector, especially when it comes to implementing something like continuous improvement? What do you think are some of the challenges government organizations face that are different than public sector or other industries? Ken, what would you say?
You know what, thinking about that question, you know, I'm not sure there are that many major differences really between sort of government organizations and private sector that are applying Lean, because I think there's a lot of common sort of thinking and practices. You know, I'd say perhaps maybe one difference is that governments sometimes are not as focused on as much on outcomes, I think, as the private sector. And I think what Lean does is it forces governments or any organization to really think about outcomes and results for their customer. And so I think that's a difference that it makes. So I think in governments, sometimes we focus a lot on inputs, not outcomes. So we develop a budget with all these you know, staff and expenses, but sometimes we don't connect that budget to what outcomes are we delivering. And I think Lean really helps you focus on the outcomes.
Good, yes. I know that one difference I've seen too is there's a lot of stakeholders in government, right? So you have to listen to the stakeholder voice. You can't ignore the stakeholder voice. So customers are very important in public, in a public, private sector, sorry. And they, the voice of the stakeholders definitely have a strong representation in government. What would you say to something like that, Eunjoo? Do you agree?
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree. One thing that's distinctive for government, actually a disadvantage in government area, is that we don't have immediate feedback from the marketplace or customers. We get complaints on processes that are very challenging and difficult from the customers. We hear much more loud and clear from the stakeholders. So there's definitely balancing those two groups at the same time when you're trying to lead process improvement work. And what is a lot easier within government space is that what is painful for our employees. And people can pick those out very quickly because they know what's bothering them every day during their processes. The linkage with how does that work impacts the customer experience is definitely slightly weaker, and we have to very focus on trying to draw that connections and getting the customers involved to get those feedback.
Yeah. The other thing, yes, I think that is so very true. The other thing that I have noticed in working with private as well as public is government tends to be risk averse because if you do something wrong, what happens? You're in the papers, right? And so there's a lot of oversight at times in processes. There's multiple approvals sometimes, or multiple hands touching things because of this risk of getting some sort of public news or you know, bad press, if you will. I don't know, Larry, what do you think? Do you think these are some of the challenges that government organizations face?
Yeah, totally agree with that. And when Eunjoo mentioned stakeholders and you mentioned press, it almost triggered me. A lot of concerns, you know, for employees. I think in the public sector, it's harder for us to try things, right? The public sector or the private sector, you can try something, you're out of sight, out of mind. If we try a new process that involves the public and it doesn't work right, we're going to hear about it. Tracy, as you mentioned, we're going to be on the front page potentially. And we have been on the front page, and people who have gone through that, they remember it. You know, people that have been involved in a process that didn't go well, you know, 15 years ago, and it was on the front page, they remember that. And so we are a very risk averse agency. It's hard to break through that.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel that people are afraid to try process improvement? So not only are, you know, in general, the organizations are a little risk averse, but do you feel that that also goes right down to the frontline employee and they don't necessarily want to do a process improvement because, you know, it feels more comfortable to sort of stay in status quo? What do you think, Larry?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think part of it too is a reaction to any change, you know, and is this a flavor of the month, or, you know, are people really committed to this? So I think there are a lot of reasons that frontline folks and mid-management as well can be really reluctant to trying a process improvement and considering change.
Yes.
It helps when people are really frustrated with the process, obviously, and I think, you know, one of the challenges is for us, maybe for others as well, is helping people understand what's possible, right? And do they really want to continue living with that frustration? And can they imagine a future where they don't have that frustration, where the process works the way they think it should work, because they're the ones that know the best, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Well, I'd really love to explore how these challenges or additional challenges might affect a continuous improvement program. So when you're embarking on continuous improvement in your experiences, because both of you guys have continuous improvement programs in your organizations, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges with launching the continuous improvement program? Are they related to what we talked about, or would you say there are additional challenges? Larry, what would you say to that?
Well, in our case, it's a handful of things. We've had Lean at the Port for about 10 years. On the one hand, that's a good thing. It continues. We've never had any efforts to shut it down. On the other hand, because it's been around so long, I think it tends to be out of sight, out of mind for a lot of people. Two of our biggest challenges, one is time. We just have so much going on. It's really hard to convince folks to carve out some time for improvement projects. Our team's been doing a lot of work on that front. And then the other big challenge for us has been getting the executive team involved and engaged and fully supported. And this is over 10 years, and it crosses over different leaders of Lean, different Lean members, and it's just kind of an organizational cultural thing. And you know, I know there's some schools of thought out there that you know, starting a program, you really have to start with the executive team, get them fully on board. We've tried that a couple of times. It hasn't been super successful, and so our approach now is we're still trying that, but we're focusing a little bit more on the senior managers, mid-level, and frankly, the frontline folks. We've had just a ton of success going in and talking to our frontline workers, our union members, and as they have done improvement projects that have been really successful, they've sort of spread the word. And so we're almost like the water cooler talk now, and we've been able to grow the program that way.
Mm-hmm. Very nice. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing our screen so we can actually see your faces a little bit better. There. Okay, so that's very helpful. I think I would like to get back to that as well, and maybe ask you a couple more detailed questions about some of those challenges. Unjoo, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges you guys have run into with continuous improvement and launching a program?
So I think it's continuous improvement in my mind is a change of mindset and behaviors. So it is not a one-time event or initiative that you can just get it done and be done with. So I think similar to what Larry was saying, we need to keep momentum after several years of doing it. So keeping it fresh and keeping it exciting over time has been challenging in some ways. I kind of think of it like, you know, if you're doing a kitchen remodel, you're done and you're done. It's exciting and you use it, it's great. But change of behaviors are a little more complex. Like if you wanted to become a runner, and I don't run personally, but if I decide to do that, that would be a lot more effort for me to get there. And just keeping that on and the discipline that required to keep going is the biggest challenge I notice. And especially from a leadership perspective, it is so important for us to continue on and having that discipline and having that vision of continue making it interesting and exciting as much as possible. So I think the recent example of us doing a yellow belt, and we just finished the Tuesday, Transformation Tuesday, where we reported out like 12 employees who's done a great job of yellow belt. And that kind of little thing that we put together can interject a lot more inspiration and excitement into the program that we've been having for almost 8 years now. And I think in King County, we're fortunate that we do have support from senior leadership team and executive level, so we don't have to convince higher ups that this is important work that we need to continue.
Very nice. Ken, what would you say? What would you say have been some of the challenges?
You know, I think, you know, Larry kind of touched on one of those that I thought I would comment on, and that is, I think when you're launching lean, usually employees are already at full capacity. They're working hard on many different projects and activities. And now you come in and you're introducing this new lean concept, lean thinking and practices. And I think sometimes you get pushbacks from employees saying, well, how are we going to fit all this in with lean and get what they're calling their regular work done? And I think it's important to try to change that conversation a little bit and talk about lean in terms of like what Eunjoo said, changing your mindset. And I think what's so important there is that you have to think about lean as how we do our work. It's a new way of approaching how we do our work. It's not the work itself. And so I think once you get to that point where lean doesn't feel like a project or activity, it's just the natural way that you do your work. It's a new set of habits. Once you develop those habits, then it becomes much easier. You sort of reach a tipping point in lean where it just takes off, but it takes time to do that. So I think that's really what we were sort of waiting for in our lean journey, is that we didn't see that tipping point for really the first couple of years, but we stuck to it. There was persistence. We invested time in training for everybody in our division to learn the lean, you know, tools and techniques, and then really encourage the problem solvers through green belt certifications, yellow belt certifications, and so on. So I think it really pays off, but you have to get to that tipping point.
Yes, yes. Some people say they liken it to a flywheel, right? So it takes an amazing amount of energy to get the flywheel to start. And then once it starts going, sometimes it feels easier because you're capturing and using that momentum.
Yeah.
But I agree. Yes, go ahead, Ken.
Well, I think there was one other important piece there, the challenge, which I think, you know, we were fortunate in King County to really have top-down leadership support and commitment for lean, all the way up to our county executive, Dow Constantine. So I felt like that's something that I had to model the way on. So we did some lean tours early in like 2013. And from that, you know, I came back really sort of energized and motivated about lean. So I felt like I was one of these, you know, sort of poker players where I had to be all in lean or it wasn't going to work. And so I think that's the way a leader has to approach this. You cannot hand this off to a consultant. You have to feel authentic about it and really model the way.
Yep. Very nice. Thank you. We have a question from Oliver. I find that in government, the resistance to change is much higher, while the actual process improvement could be very simple, like approvals or signatures or storing information, not like complex manufacturing processes with a lot of physical constraints. What do you think, or do you have a similar experience? What would you say to that? Would you agree to that? Would you disagree? What are your thoughts? Larry, why don't you go ahead and share if you have anything?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I would generally agree with that. I think the processes should be simple, but often they have become complex. And I recall a project that we had that involved getting office keys at the airport for new employees. And it could take up to 6 or 7 months. And the process was really pretty simple once we figured it all out, but you had a situation where people just weren't involved the way they should have been. And so it's not complex in the way that a manufacturing process is, but we've made the paperwork bureaucracy unnecessarily complex and frustrating. And then I would say we do have some physical constraints. I think of another project that involved picking up garbage out of our airport garage and the routing of trucks and how much garbage could a certain size truck, take. And so, and the place that they were taking the garbage to was at the complete opposite end of the airport. And so I don't know if you call that a physical constraint or not, but there are some physical attributes of that process that that we were able to improve and save a lot of windshield time and reduce a lot of frustration on the behalf of drivers. So while I would generally agree with that, I think it may be a little more complicated than on the surface.
Yes. And Eunjoo, do you have anything that you want to speak to about that?
Actually, this question reminds me of the project that I worked on several years ago, which was improving travel approval process in King County. It was all about handover and review. There were 7 steps of approvals involved. This connects back to our earlier conversation around risk averse. When you look at that process, actually the dollars they were approving was somewhere around $3,000 to $5,000. It's not that much money. But because we are in public sector and people are scared and worried about any kind of bad press, it only takes one bad press to taint the process, right? So we bulletproofed it by putting so many approval steps. And cutting those approval steps were, it wasn't super easy getting buy-in, but we were fortunate enough to have support from our boss to be able to let go of some steps, and we were able to cut out a lot of steps and reduce the approval to 7 to like 2 steps, which was a lot simpler. And yeah, things like that definitely happens here. I think we confuse better internal control with more approvals, not necessarily having clarity about approvers, what they're looking for, and better preparing them to be able to review what they're doing it better. So you think more set size are better, and not necessarily. You need to make sure your process is clear and everyone understands their roles and responsibilities along the way.
Yes. So I remember that project, Eunjoo, and what I loved about that project and how it was found is Eunjoo was in that process and she said, why am I involved in this process so much? And so as a leader, I remember her saying, get me out of this process, right? And so I think, that is definitely one thing leaders could do. Sometimes we say leaders are in the way. And one thing that leaders can do to support process improvement is to recognize how they're contributing waste or added steps. And I think many people Eunjoo is very approachable, don't get me wrong, but there could be a lot of employees at FBOD that don't necessarily want to go to Eunjoo and go, I don't think you're adding value. Right?
For sure, yeah.
So,
I didn't feel like I was adding value anyways.
So it's wonderful for Eunjoo to say, look, I don't think this is adding value to help me figure this out. And I think if leaders could do that a little bit more, people would be more likely to say, oh, she's open to making a change. But I think sometimes people feel like, I don't even want to try to convince these 100 stakeholders that why we need to reduce this process by 3 approvals. So I think it's getting out of the way, as Ken said. He said get out of the way as well. And I think being conscious and mindful as leaders to say, oh, we should get out of the way. So that the reason why I bring that up is because it's a segue to this next question that Ismail has. I work for a federally qualified health center. How do you get executive level buy-in for lean? There's so many moving parts and everyone is working at capacity that the mentality is if it's not broken, don't fix it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It does remind me a little bit about your initial journey, Ken, with how you guys got started. But did you want to speak to maybe that question and maybe how you guys decided to support the lean? You mentioned it a little bit already, but can you expand on that?
Sure. You know, I think that what was important for us was to, at a suggestion from a colleague who was helping us at the time, he said, you know, if you really want to learn about lean and sort of the benefits, you need to go see it. You need to go see it in action. So he encouraged us to go on some tours of lean organizations. We actually went to it was a tour of a small manufacturing firm in Washington, and it was situation where they had about 200 employees manufacturing, you know, custom upholstered furniture. And we could see, you know, it was about the same size as our division. And what I could see is their leaders were 100% committed. They had visual management everywhere. You could tell how they were doing just by looking at their performance boards. And you could see how engaged the employees were in problem solving. And so, you know, I stepped away from that tour really feeling like we could do this. This seems doable. It's going to take time, but it just, when I saw the level of engagement of the employees, where they were training their other colleagues on how to do a better work process or highlighting an improvement that they made, they were showing that every year they were saving the company at least $1 million when they added up all of these small improvements. So I thought, you know, we could do something similar. So I think that's a key for, you know, sort of selling or marketing lean is the leaders have to get out and see it in action. And then I think it pays off. The other thing that I think is a benefit that I didn't realize when I started lean, and I wish somebody would have emphasized this, and that is, as a leader, lean really makes your job easier and more rewarding. And why wouldn't you want to do that, right? And it's because you're not in you're in a leadership role, you're coaching problem solvers. In a non-lean environment, what happens is a leader is often the problem solver. And so they're like the firefighter every day trying to solve problems, and it wears you out. Whereas in lean, if you've got everybody in your division engaged in problem solving, the work is a lot more rewarding. It's less stress for you. You'll get more done. And so I think if you can convince leaders that that is the transition you're making from sort of a traditional leader where you're solving all the problems to a lean leader where you're coaching problem solvers, that's the key.
Very nice. Larry, what do you think? What would you say to executives and buy-in? What has been working for you? It sounds like you've had a challenge over the last 10 years and you've made some progress, it sounds like. So let's hear about some of the things that you think would work.
Yeah, you know, we've tried the traditional approach of you take your entire executive team off-site for 3 to 5 days and put them through an intensive course. And we just haven't, I'm really jealous of organizations that have been able to do that. We have not been able to get over that hump. And so we've taken sort of a rifle shot approach and targeted executives that we thought were more open to this, and we've had some success with that. The 2 things that we've done very specific recently that have helped a lot, our team did ideas boards and pick charts for inside one division. And the executive of that division came to a couple of report outs and came back just so excited and so committed to lean. And what that person told me was it was all about the employee engagement. So in a typical division all staff meeting, this executive is talking most of the time, right? And what the executive said is, when I go to these report outs, it's a conversation. And I can see people get excited about their ideas, and they talk about things that they tried that didn't work, and I can verbally support that and encourage it. And it just provided for an entirely new higher level of employee engagement. And so we've been leveraging that to do even more improvement projects in that division. Another thing, I want to mention two other things. One thing we did with our executive retreat late last year was we also ran them through an ideas board and a pick chart. And that was around what are your pain points? What are your frustrations? What would you really like to see us improve with the Lean team? And that made it very personal to them. It was less of an organization-wide thing. COVID sort of interrupted our progress on that, but we're slowly getting back to that. But that got a lot of executives much more interested in pursuing Lean projects. The last thing I would say, and this is something that we struggle with, sometimes we're better at it, other times not, is storytelling. And so helping executives understand what are the projects that have that are going on, what has been the success of projects, what are the workers saying that have been involved. You can write and publish stories about that. Those are successful to some degree. You can also have the stories told in person. So getting the executives, again, to come to report outs and hearing the employees talk about the difference that it's made in their job and the difference that it's made in their lives. Everybody relates to a story. It's what they remember. It's what they can repeat. And I continue to think that that's really key to getting executive support. And Trace, that's one of the things I really loved about the Transformation Tuesdays. Again, I'm very jealous of what you and King County were able to do. It's those kind of stories that I think can make a difference and really hook in your executives.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Well, you guys have been on a journey. Larry, you said you've been doing this roughly about 10 years. Ken, you guys have been doing this how long? 8 years?
Since 2013.
Since 2013. Can you just share a little bit about how you did get started in a nutshell? I mean, we don't have a lot of time, but I'd love to hear kind of the progression of how you implemented it, and maybe some of the things that you felt like worked really well in the past. And then I'd love to maybe explore what's happening and working today.
Well, actually, our journey got off to a rough start because we took the fast food approach, I would say, to Lean, where we tried to train a group of 12 employees and put them through a 2-week boot camp in Lean Six Sigma. Eunjoo was actually one of those, we called them the green belts. And the idea was to embed these expert green belts in each part of our division, each one of our sections, and then positive change would just start sprouting up all over the place. But it really didn't work that way very well. And it's because we hadn't prepared our employees and our culture for this kind of change. And so it's really important for us to go back and think about what is the vision, what is the culture we want to create, then introduce Lean tools and techniques. Because in some ways we were like this farmer that throws out the seeds without sort of cultivating the soil first. And so we had some spot growth, we had a few improvement projects going on, but nothing that was really sustainable. So I think for us, we had to step back. We did some fundamental things to work on our culture and get people closer together and to really understand what we were doing. So we put everybody through the training for Lean. And we also had them take a class called Crucial Conversations, which really helped them work as teams so that they could, when there was conflict about how to improve a process, they could do this in a respectful way. And so I think that those combinations of skills really helped us get off to a much better start in Lean, where we started introducing then the techniques again, and people could apply it within teams using these new skills we had taught.
Yes, and what I think I remember the story of you guys getting started, and I think there was a bit of a surprise about employee engagement and how that had an effect. Your lean process improvement deployment approach. What happened to employee engagement over the last couple of years at FBOD? Did you feel like there's a correlation?
Oh, definite correlation, and maybe Eunjoo can touch on this. But we actually had a chance to look at our, employee engagement as measured through our employee survey that we've taken every year for last probably 4 years, and you could actually see from questions on that employee engagement survey that was just sort of steady, rises in scores that showed that we kept focusing on our culture. We want everybody in our division to be a problem solver. We want everybody to build their problem solving muscles. We want to focus on our value of respect, because part of having respect for employees is respecting their problem solving capabilities and skills. And so we really wanted to emphasize that and say, it's create an environment where it's safe to identify and help solve problems as an individual and as teams. And I think when we started emphasizing that over and over and made it safe for employees to kind of get these problems out there and to talk about them, when we did these, we called them process roundings, it sort of built trust with management, and you could just sort of see things take off from there. And so I think that was kind of going back to the flywheel. People stopped sort of asking me what I wanted to see on their performance boards and just started talking about how they were doing on what was important. So it wasn't sort of like, what does management want? They had already decided, here's what we think is important and here's what we should measure. And here's why we're measuring it. And so watching that transition was amazing.
Tracy, can I jump in on that?
Yes, please.
Ken, that's really interesting to me. And I'd be really curious to learn a little bit more about employee engagement surveys. We did, in the connection of Lean, we did one, it's been a couple of years ago, and it was really eye-opening to me with sort of my Lean glasses on. What we learned is that we had an extremely high percentage of employees who were really dedicated to providing superior customer service. But at the same time, we had a very low percentage of employees who felt like they had the tools, the processes to deliver on that customer service. And I became a real broken record at the port, reciting that employee survey as evidence for expanding the Lean program and doing more projects. It didn't get us as far down the path as I thought I might, but I thought that was just really great evidence of a need for process improvement.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Eunjoo, what would you like to add?
I think what was interesting, what Ken was just talking about, employee survey, we've tracked, so we were fortunate enough to have like 3-year data around employee survey questions, and we picked the ones that we think were relevant to Lean. So such as problems are seen as opportunities, my ideas are valued by my supervisors, and things like that. And we could actually chart the progress, and over time, you can see the scores going up and up and up each year. And that was really great to see. And I do think as we implemented our Lean, one of the things that worked the best, and also we get a lot of mileage out of it, is a leader process rounding. So which is where we do a Kanban walk for leader. Every Thursday, Ken and I go out and meet with the 2 employees from a different work areas, and they just share their process. It's a learning opportunity for us. And it's a way that we connect with the frontline employees directly without having their supervisors and managers attend them, but it's another way for us to continue to talk about asking questions around what's bothering them, what improvement can they come up with. And it's surprising how often that employees come up with these amazing ideas and they just try and see what worked, and they're excited to share their success stories. And there are also not hesitant to bring up the issues they need help from the leadership. So creating that safe space to have these dialogues over time, and we've been doing this for so many years now, and it is actually quite a fun part of our week, and we enjoy doing them, and oftentimes leads to another conversations and around the improvement that they want to see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's an excellent point. I think if we were to start our lean journey, from scratch, one of the things that I would introduce right away would be these process roundings, because I think it's an easy way to start lean and build trust with your employees about what you're trying to accomplish. And you're actually having these individual conversations as you're walking through a business process that they're working on from start to end. And you're asking them, what's working well, what isn't, what would you like to see changed, and so on. So I just think it's a great way to build trust, and you can start that at any time. You can even do it before you even talk about lean. You can just say, I want to start learning more about these business processes that our employees are involved in every single day. And so I think that's has been a big benefit for us.
And I'll just interject for those of you that are not familiar with process roundings. The term came from healthcare when doctors make their roundings, but it ultimately is going to a certain area and walking the process and seeing the process from the people that do the process and work in the process. And I'll just say, I remember one time I was on site with FBOD and there was a process rounding. I said, oh yeah, I'll come. And it was in the vendor registration process. So if you want to do business with the county, this is the process you must go through to become a vendor. And the gentleman that told Ken, go ahead, sit down. Now go ahead and try to register.
Yeah, I made it about halfway is all. It was painful.
And it was painful. And like, that is a great example of, okay, let's look at this process from the vendor perspective and look at how complicated it is. And boy, Ken, were you on board that we needed to make improvements to that process?
Oh, I was 100% on board. When you actually see the pain and feel the pain, you want to do something about it. So that led to one of our major projects right now to improve our technology, for our procurement system for vendors.
Yes. And I think, there's still some questions about getting leadership buy-in, and, people think things are fine. And I think one thing that has been very successful in government is showing people the pain. So show leaders the pain of the process and say, this doesn't have to be this way, because you're right. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's fine. If it's not broken, don't fix it. Or they don't want to spend the time thinking about, they're not motivated to change, but if they see how much pain is happening in the process, that could be a lot of motivation for people. So we're running out of time already. I can't believe it. So I would love to hear a little bit about what's a recent challenge that you guys have had lately, and maybe what are you experimenting with to try to overcome it? Larry, did you want to share anything around that?
Sure. Well, COVID obviously is the biggest challenge. So much of our work is done in person. You gather a bunch of people in a room and get around the whiteboard do exercises. And so I think that was the first challenge that our team faced. And to their credit, they were able to figure out some workarounds pretty quickly. We've been using a program called Mural, testing that out. We've had some great success with that. It's basically a virtual whiteboard that you can get a whole bunch of people on a Zoom call or a Teams call and still work through your processes. So we've been able to pivot and figure out how to continue offering our classes virtually, and our participation is roughly the same as it was pre-COVID. But the other thing for us is operating the airport, as you might imagine, and even our boat marinas. COVID has just, I like to say, there are 1,000,001 questions, and each one of those has another 1,000,000 questions in and of itself. And so it's just been hard for the organization, I think, to sort of continue the pace that we were on with our lean projects. I think that's the biggest thing for us right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about Eunjoo and Ken? What challenges have you been encountering, and what are you doing to try to overcome those, if anything, at this moment with lean process improvement?
So similar to what Larry was talking about, so COVID did throw us a curveball in it. We were trying to, I think we were gearing up for some exciting stuff for this year earlier to explore how we can align our goals and activities better in organizational movements. But I think virtual operations took priority right away, starting March. In that it was challenging, and it felt like because COVID response was such a priority, so our priorities somewhat shifted. So lean sort of took back burner for a couple of months, but we had to pick it up. And as part of operational virtual operation, we were able to create virtual tier board, and which has been a strong focus for us for the last few months. And interestingly enough, there were way more frequent huddles in a lot of team members because you had to connect more to know what's going on within your team members. And they were able to capture a lot of what's going on in operations in their virtual board. And what we are currently seeing, one of the silver lining is that we were able to connect what's happening at a team level, section level, to a division level, much better in similar platforms where we were connecting each other in our, what we call a tier board, which is our visual control. So in some ways, it gave us a lot better visual, what's actually going on down in a small team level versus what we could have seen in the past. So there were some resistance around, I have my metrics in my computer, why should I print it and put it on the board so that you can see it? It seemed like more work for me. I heard that a lot, and now they don't even have to print it out, and it's just there in wherever they're sharing their information for their team members. And that's been actually one great thing came out of the COVID, and we hope we can continue and refine those as the time go by.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely some benefits to that. I'm seeing a lot of people wanting to know how you're sharing success stories. So we did mention Transformation Tuesday. It was basically a series of 5 different webinar style sessions where we highlighted yellow belt projects. They had 10 to 15 minutes each to share. What are some other ways you guys have celebrated success that you feel like has worked out really well? Because I think, Eunjoo, you raised a good point about, how do we make it so that people want to participate too, right? So Larry, do you have anything that you want to share around celebrating success?
Well, I think hearing the employees' stories, the frontline workers, hearing them talk about their projects, their successes in their own words has been really impactful. We have a blog internally. We try to publish stories. We're about to experiment with doing that with video. We think that might hold some promise. Mm-hmm. We have celebratory events. We have an innovation award at the port, and quarterly and an annual. And I think almost every quarter we have 1 or 2 CPI lean projects that are nominated. And so that gives us an opportunity to call out those folks and talk about the successes of the program.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sharing success stories works great, especially when they get results. Ken, do you have any that you want to share that you've some of the success or the celebrating successes that you feel like have worked over the last few years that you guys have done this?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things that we've done to celebrate is we've actually put a spotlight on our employees and had, basically provided, lean tours where they could tell others from other organizations what they were working on and how they were doing. We've done this with sort of lean, I think we call them lean fairs, like yellow belt fairs or green belt fairs, where a group of employees would invite other county employees to basically come and visit and learn about what they've done with their improvements. I think the power of that is that when you have employees telling their stories and explaining their accomplishments, there's a lot of power in that, and it sort of builds up momentum so that other employees see that and they want to be part of that positive atmosphere. So I think that's been great. I think also from the process roundings, just talking to individuals and encouraging them has been a great way to sort of encourage and reward lean. The one that I can think of is real quick is that there used to be a process, well, there is a process called verification of employment when an employee retires. And it's a very painful process because it used to be some of those records were on microfiche that was years and years old. And so this is where you have to verify that somebody has 30, 40 years with the county, they're getting ready to retire. So I said in one of the process roundings, can we go back and look at my records from the early 1980s? And it was so painful to watch what they had to do. They spent 15 minutes trying to find one or two of my records. And I thought, we can't have a really good employee who's highly motivated working in this poor of an environment. And so what we did is we worked with them later to get all of those records converted and scanned automatically. They don't have to work in microfiche anymore. And we really celebrated the success of that. It saved countless hours and dollars, and it really changed the complete system that we were just used to working with and didn't think twice of it until we actually observed it in a process rounding. I said to myself, I can't make anybody do this kind of work anymore. It's too painful.
Right. You know, when you started doing the process roundings, what was the initial response of employees? Were they afraid?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, they used to, before we started process roundings in our lean journey, employees used to tell me when we would see Ken walk down the hall, we knew somebody was in trouble. Because I would only go into a manager or supervisor's office and communicate with them, and then I'd walk back to my office. And there wasn't a whole lot of interaction with employees, maybe in the lunchroom once in a while. But the lean changed that dynamic, especially through the process roundings, where you can make connections with individual employees and talk to them about a work process, but we also talked about some personal things in there and kind of what's going on in their life, and they've got their family pictures up there and so on. So you built connections that you didn't have before, and I think that has really helped us build trust throughout the organization. And so now when I walk down the hall, and I do this virtually now in our meetings, it's sort of like, if I join a huddle now, people keep talking, and they know I'm there, but it doesn't, they just say, oh, Ken's here, okay, no problem. Whereas before I could never do that. There would be silence if I showed up. It's like, okay, what's he doing here? Why is he here?
Yeah. So, and I think you've done a great job of creating a safe environment, right? Creating ideal conditions that people can improve. They can talk about problems when typically people don't want to talk about problems, or they're told not to talk about problems. So good. We're almost out of time. So I just want to ask one more question. What advice might you have for anyone in government that is looking to embark on continuous improvement or implementing continuous improvement? What would you recommend? Larry, what would you say to that?
One thing I would suggest is collecting success stories from other governments, other public agencies. I think a lot of people who don't know much about lean, they maybe know enough to associate it with the private sector, and in particular manufacturing and of course Toyota. And so people can think, well, it doesn't work for government, that's not a government thing. And so I think being able to share some stories from other public agencies and stories about how it's really impacted, benefited employees could be very helpful in getting a program off the ground.
Mm-hmm. Unjoo, what would you say?
I would definitely second that. Go see is super important. Just take people and go see it, because oftentimes seeing is believing. I think for us, to be successful in implementation, one of the key things we did early on actually going to see a successful lean organization. That way you have a vision of where you want it to go to, and it's very concrete. And when you have that picture, it is a lot easier for you to figure out how to get to, point A to point B. So having that vision is totally important. One other thing I would suggest, get help if you need help, because none of us are raised in management style as a lean managers, lean leaders. It is a whole new thing for you to learn, and also become familiarized, and also changing your behavior, which is hard to do for any individuals to get there. So don't fool yourself that you can do all this and do it by yourself. Get help. Get consultants if you need to, or external help, or other organizations who's gone through it, ask for help. Lastly, for me, most important is be patient. This is a marathon, not a sprint. If you think you can get it done within next 3 to 4 years, you will be disappointed and disheartened, and then you might not be able to sustain what you have accomplished in those years. So be patient and do as much as you can, and then just know that whatever you do does make a difference over time. Good.
And Ken, how about you? Thank you, Eunjoo.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe just to build on that, because those are really good points, Eunjoo. I think it's also important in a lean journey to realize that the secret sauce is engaged employees solving problems. And when you see that time and time again, and you can keep reinforcing that, it makes work more fun and more interesting. Because if you think about it, what employees are really, I guess, if you think about an engaged workforce, and Daniel Pink talks about this in his book Drive, he says you have to have autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Lean gives you all that, where employees have more autonomy to really fix problems and to do their work with more freedom. And then they get better and better at this over time. We've seen that in our division. They develop mastery. And then there's this connection to purpose, because everything is focused on problem solving for customers and connected to our county vision, where we're trying to create a welcoming community where everyone can thrive. So if you have that combination, that's really what you're after. So I think you have to have this continual persistence in vision to get to where you want to be. And I think that is so critical. But going out and seeing that helps you create your own vision.
Very nice. Thank you so much for joining our panel today. I can't thank you enough, Ken, Eunjoo, and Larry, for providing your insights, talking about your trials and tribulations, as well as some of the things that worked. We really, really appreciate it. I'm going to just share my screen again and see if anybody has any questions. I think you guys have been doing a great job about answering questions or putting questions in the chat window as we've gone through. So I'll just see if there are any more questions that we can answer. And also wanted to share, because these did come up, and we also put the link in the chat window already, but these are all good examples of government projects that have been improved. And as you can see on the top left is Eunjoo, how Lean Six Sigma reduced travel expense approval time by 94%. That is Eunjoo's project. So that was the one she was referencing earlier. So we have all of these things are free on our website under our success stories project examples under the government tab. So feel free to share any of these with anyone you want, because it'll help them with the success. So it was really nice to hear your perspectives. We really appreciate it. I don't see any additional questions in here. And so I'll go ahead and close the webinar now. Thank you so much for attending, and thank you for doing such good work in government. All right, you guys, take care.